some stuff I did about warm and cool light. When you're using cool light, maybe if it's evening or raining or drizzly, or if you want to talk about people being sad, this would be more on the sad side. And then there's warm light used when you're feeling bubbly and happy. So this is Toy Story, this is Batman. And then so when you're using cool light, everything you do, you would use a more blue in your reds. Your yellows would be a little more brown, and your blues are obviously more blue, but they're also more gray. So these are the more gray blues. And one of the things you can do to keep your painting alive, so it doesn't just fall completely dead, is to put warm colors into the cool backgrounds. Now there's a light reason for this in science. It has to do with the sun. It has to do with indoor lighting. It has to do with shadows. What I'd like to do is just stick to how it works rather than why it works, because the truth is it doesn't always work the way they say it does. But generally, in general terms, when you're using cool light, you want to have warmer shadows. So if you look really closely, this shadow gray has a lot of yellow in it, and this shadow has a lot of red in it. And then here I've got the shadow passing up onto the box, which in an earlier video I talked about different ways to show distance, right? This would imply, when we're talking about size and proximity, proximity overrides size here. You assume this is a bigger box, right? Even though it's placed farther away, you assume it's bigger because of the proximity takes precedent. You'll notice that the farthest part of my drawing and the closest part of my drawing are all the same purple, so I'm not using color to show distance in this. I'm showing a sense of ambiance with the color. So in the warm light, I have more of an orangey brown background, maybe like a burnt sienna. And the reason I have this kind of muddier background is to bring these forward. So this comes closest to me because it's the brightest. These are muddied down. And so I have cool colors in my shadows in the warm light and warm colors in my shadows in the cool light. And what that does is it creates that contrast. It doesn't matter what you're using. So that's why some of these laws kind of flip on their head sometimes, right? Because if you're using cool light spectrum, then your warm colors give some depth to the shadows, whereas if you're using a warm light spectrum, your cool shadows give more depth to the warm objects because it brings warm objects closer. In a sense, your warm painting comes closer to you and your cool painting is moving farther away, right? Like the warm colors in the background and the cool painting are pushing back, whereas the warm colors in this warm painting are pushing forward. And you can actually see that even though these are the same size and the same proximity, this one actually feels like it's a little closer than that one, you know? So if these were bigger pieces, you'd feel like you're looking at a close-up of the same picture. And then, okay, so there's some other things that happen that get even more complex. So I'm gonna push this aside, and then I'm gonna talk about how colors bounce. So within my warm colors and my warm shadows, right, the light that comes off of here is going to bounce into the shadow. And that's what I was showing with those markers last week, is when I put this red pen down, you can see here and here where the red kind of bounces off the pen and onto the paper. But if you put a yellow ball on a white table, you're going to have a little bit of yellow showing up, bouncing off the ball and onto the table. You'll have a little bit of red bouncing off the ball and onto the table. You have a little bit of blue bouncing off the ball and onto the table. However, the other side of your shadow, the farthest side of the shadow, is actually going to be the opposite color of what you're looking at. So you might want to put, and now these are not opposites in the sense of your red, yellow, blue color wheel. I inverted this in the computer, so I got a more of a true, the opposite of my yellow here is like a magenta, the opposite of my red is a green, and the opposite of my blue is an orange. But I have these. This is the same picture. What I did was I cranked up the hue on this picture to show you what this would actually look like if you turned up the colors full blast. So when you turn the colors full blast, this gray turned pink, this gray turned green, this gray turned orange, and that's just what happened in the computer because the computer is programmed to understand light. And so even just in Photoshop, when I crank up the hue, it gives me the answers. So, you know, if you're adept with Photoshop and that sort of thing, you can often take a painting and put it into the computer and crank it up and have the computer tell you what colors you might want to use to challenge yourself. So this is the same picture as this was, but made smaller. And when I cranked up the colors, you can see, when I cranked up the hue, right, you can see that this brown turned bright orange. This blue didn't change much. This red didn't change much. This yellow didn't change much. They were already about as bright as they can get. My what was a gray shadow, or I guess a purple shadow, turned really purple here. And this gray shadow in the first one, turns out it's actually light, dirty red. So actually, and I'll show you how to do this with your phone as well. I like to use Instagram, the filters in Instagram. You know, people say like no filter. Yeah, no filter. I like to use the photos in Instagram to test to see where things could go. So I'll take a picture and I'll crank up the contrast, and sometimes I'll save it and crank it up again. And even just in your phone, you can modify these things to pull out colors and sort of see what, well, if I had bug vision, if I could see like a bug did,
the shadow would have a tiny, tiny bit of red in it.
Because when I crank up the hue, it's got a ton of red in it. And so that's how I like to look at colors. Now, I think I'll just try drawing a cube. You will know this is a 0-point perspective because the back sides are the same as the front sides. And then let's say my light source is over here. I've got my expensive markers. If I were to organize these, this is a cool color, although you can see it's kind of warm. Right, this is a warm, cool color. It's a pretty warm color. It should be a cool color, a warm color. So, you know, you can see I'm sort of making a rainbow, but I'm not really, actually. I'm making a forwards to background colors. And I know a lot of my friends will set up their paint palettes in a way that they can follow. All right, this is green. It should be a cool color, but I'm actually putting it with the warms because the brightness of it makes it look warm. If there's something that looks weird in here to you, that's fine. You know, if you see something that looks different to you, that's totally fine because there really are no right or wrong answers, but I'm going to push these down a bit. All right, so let's say I take my brightest blue, which is probably this one, the color, the top. Oh, that's a dark blue. All right, so color the top. Actually, because that's so much darker than I was expecting, I'm gonna change my light source to here. So here's the lights coming. And then, so if I have that there, maybe I take a purple. It's not a bad idea to have a scrap of paper next to you. Or if you're working on a big sheet of paper, to just sort of pick some of the sides and say, well, from here over, I'm just going to test out my markers. So I told you that the green should be a cooler color, but actually green's a pretty warm color. And that's one of the things that kind of frustrated me about the red, yellow, blue color wheel. I mean, it should be kind of a warmer color because you can see blue with the warmer yellow makes green. If my light source is here, then my shadow's going off in this direction. Do you remember what I said? If I have cool colors in my object, I want warm colors for my shadow. You know, a bright yellow shadow is going to be confusing, right? Because you'll say to yourself, what is that? Why is the shadow so bright? So I'm not really going to go with a bright yellow shadow, but I might kind of dummy it down to more of a brown. And the opposite of blue is orange. So if I start thinking about what would my dark orange look like, my dark orange could look like brown. And there's my light source. Now, if I have light coming at it, let's say I have this yellow light coming at the box, then I would have yellow bouncing down to the ground from and I would have some yellow curving around the corners a bit, and I would have like streams of yellow coming at the box. And since this box is coming out of my mind, then the local color scheme means anything I want to do. So what would be convenient for this is if I pick an opposite color to the object that I'm working with and build off of that. That'll give it kind of more depth. Now, opposite of blue, probably orange, and I'm going to go with more of a red, but I'm picking a warmer color for the background, something that's close to orange, but not exactly. They bleed into each other. I might even go right over top of that shadow. I think that my background is too warm, so I'm going to put some more cools kind of around my shadow and kind of mellow out my area that I'm looking at. And actually, so maybe I'll have some more cooler colors at the back of the box. I like to often have shadows that are lighter than my background, and I know that that's wrong. Like it doesn't exist so much in science. Is it just something I like to do with my drawings because it leaves it that one little twist that leaves you wondering, like, something seems wrong here, but I'm not sure what it is. And after all that talk, I've shut down completely thinking about what I'm doing, and now I'm just purely going in my intuitive mode. And I'm just thinking about what do I feel like putting down, which is, I know, right? Like I spend all this time telling you to think. Just feel it with your heart. All right, well that's some. I got cool colors in the foreground. I've kind of lost my background. I'm gonna go in and make that shadow more intense. Now, all right, this is a good example. So I have purple here, but there's a warmth to this purple. It's like a warm purple. And so I'm going to take that and crank it up in Photoshop and give you a good example of what's really happening with these colors. And I think that was worth doing today.